The storm had just passed, leaving behind a restless hush in the woods that lined the narrow road. David gripped the steering wheel with one hand, the other gently resting on the back seat where his daughter, Emily, was fast asleep. The windshield wipers swiped away the last of the drizzle as his tired eyes scanned the road just minutes away from home. Then, something unusual caught his eye. A flash of white in the trees, a quick blur. Probably a plastic bag caught on a branch, he thought. But something about it didn't sit right. He slowed the truck and reversed slightly, peering into the woods. And that's when he saw her. A woman, drenched and shivering, stood barefoot with her arms awkwardly held behind her. Her white dress, what looked like a wedding gown, was ripped and muddy. Her hair clung to her face like wet threads. But what stopped David cold wasn't the dress or the look of raw terror in her eyes. It was the chain. A thick, rusted chain wrapped around the tree trunk, with the other end locked around her wrist. For a moment, David froze. This wasn't something out of a movie. It was real enough to make his heart thunder harder than the storm had. He looked at his daughter, still sleeping, then back at the woman. He got out, stepping carefully over branches and wet leaves, approaching slowly, palms open. "Hey," he said softly, "I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to help." The woman flinched, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Please," she whispered hoarsely, "don't take me back." That's when David knew this wasn't a trick or a prank. This was a rescue. And it had just begun. David quickly knelt and examined the chain. The lock was old, rusted, but sturdy. With steady hands and a quiet prayer, he pulled out the crowbar from the truck bed. It took all his strength and a few painful minutes, but the lock finally gave in with a loud snap. The woman collapsed into his arms, her legs too weak to hold her. She was ice cold and smelled like rain and fear. "Come on," he whispered, lifting her gently and carrying her to the truck. Emily stirred in the back seat, her sleepy eyes blinking open. Instead of being frightened, she reached out and covered the woman with her little pink blanket. "She's cold," Emily murmured. The woman looked at the child, her lips trembling, not from the cold, but from the unfamiliar warmth of kindness. David didn't ask questions. He simply drove. Home. At the cabin, he gave her dry clothes, food, and space. She didn't say her name, just sat in the corner staring at the fireplace. Emily, curious but careful, offered her a crayon and paper. Slowly, the woman scribbled something. Maya. It was the only word she spoke that night. David knew pain when he saw it. His wife had battled cancer for 2 years before passing. Since then, life had been about work, parenting, surviving. But this woman, this stranger, had a kind of brokenness he couldn't turn away from. He didn't know her story yet, but something deep inside told him. They were both lost souls, and maybe, just maybe, they had found each other by fate. The sun was soft that morning, casting long golden lines across the garden. David was pulling weeds while Emily filled pots with marigold seeds. Maya, dressed in one of David's old flannel shirts, sat quietly on the porch swing. Her eyes followed every motion, yet she said nothing. Until Emily offered her a tiny shovel and said, "You can help us grow stuff." For the first time, Maya smiled, hesitantly. She walked barefoot into the soil and began planting beside Emily. The silence between them felt warm, not heavy. After a while, David asked, "You don't have to talk, but if you want to, I'll listen." Maya glanced at the trees, her fingers still pushing dirt. "I was supposed to be married yesterday," she whispered, "to a man I didn't choose, a man twice my age. My parents said it was tradition. When I said no, they called it dishonor. So they chained me, told me to think about what kind of woman refuses family." David swallowed hard. He'd seen pain, held his wife's hand through her last breath. But this was different. This was betrayal by blood. Maya continued, voice shaking. I ran before twice, but this time, I knew I wouldn't survive if I went back. Emily placed a flower in Maya's hand. You don't have to go back. Daddy says we protect people here. And just like that, something shifted. Maya wasn't just a stranger anymore. She was part of their soil, their morning routines, their quiet moments. Her story had thorns, but there was room to bloom. David looked at her differently now. Not with pity, but with a kind of respect. She wasn't weak. She had survived. And now she was healing. News spread fast in their small town. Some folks whispered at the grocery store. Others came straight to David's door. You can't just keep her, said the sheriff. There are laws. You don't know what kind of trouble you're inviting. David stood firm. She's not a stray dog. She's a human being who needed help. I'm not sending her back to Vior, the people who chained her like an animal. Emily clung to Maya's hand. Maya stood in the background, shoulders trembling, shame flooding her face. But David turned to her and said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, you have nothing to be ashamed of. We protect people here. A social worker showed up the next day. Official forms, background checks, endless questions. David answered everything calmly. He told the truth about finding her, about giving her shelter, about doing what any decent person should have done. The woman from the agency frowned. This kind of kindness, it's rare. People usually look the other way. David's voice cracked just slightly. I lost my wife 3 years ago. She taught me that love isn't just romantic. It's showing up when it's hardest. It's not leaving someone behind. The agency gave temporary approval. Maya could stay, for now. That night, Maya sat beside Emily on the porch swing. The child leaned on her shoulder like she'd always belonged there. David watched them through the kitchen window, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. He had fought for someone who couldn't fight for herself, and in doing so, he had started to feel whole again. 6 months passed. The seasons turned from gold to snow to bloom again. And under the great willow tree in their backyard, the same tree where Maya had first planted flowers with Emily, David stood in a plain shirt, holding her hands. She wore white again. But this time, it wasn't a symbol of control. It was freedom. Their guests were few. A neighbor who had once doubted them. The social worker who now smiled, and of course Emily, who tossed wildflowers with both hands and shouted, "Best day ever." David spoke his vows with trembling words. I didn't expect you, but you gave us color again. You gave us laughter. You gave us another chance at family. Maya's voice was steadier. I was broken, but you never tried to fix me. You just held the pieces gently. That gave me strength. Tears flowed, but they were no longer from sadness. They were for the pain that had passed, and the love that had bloomed in its place. After the ceremony, Emily pulled on David's sleeve. So is she my mom now? David kneeled beside her. Only if you want her to be. Emily ran to Maya and hugged her waist tightly. Hi, Mom. The woman who had once been chained now knelt on the grass, arms around a child who chose her, and a man who believed in her. And as the wind rustled through the willow leaves, the past finally let go. Sometimes, the strongest families aren't the ones we're born into. They're the ones we build with love, hope, and the courage to begin again.